Hello, hello. Today we'll discuss all about motherhood, whether that's something that's for you, what can motherhood actually look like for different folks, and what can modern motherhood look like, whatever that term means, right? So, of course, this is a part of our Make Sense series with Tharani Foundation. Just going to quickly add Team Tharani to the live and we'll get started. We also have guests. For those of you who've seen the poster, you know that already. But yeah, I think Artika will join us in just a moment. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Just been a long day. How about for you? I know you're traveling today. What's that been like?
Yeah, so I'm in Haridwar. I'm sitting on the floor and doing this for today. But I'm so excited because we've had this plan for very long. And yeah,
Yeah.
you were just giving an introduction. Please continue.
No, I was just like, I was telling our audience why we were curious about this topic. It wasn't us, like, full disclosure. It was Madhura who'll also join us in just a second. She's a psychiatrist, and she said, hey, this is the topic that I've been meaning to explore with, like, folks who have different ideas of motherhood, and folks who access different avenues of being mothers and motherhood as well, whether that be a pet parent, whether it be through some kind of technological intervention, and adoption, like so many different ways in which a person can be a mother apart from the biological way, so to say, right? Artika, why were you curious about this topic?
Because I feel like, first of all, like it's high time we talk about it. So thank you to Dr. Madhura for bringing it to our notice, right? Because it is something that has a biological aspect to it, which is maybe perceived as more closer to the work we do because we work in sex ed and people imagine that's closer to it. But I feel that the cultural aspect of it is equally important. Like how motherhood is culturally perceived is an important part of us saying that we're working towards a sex positive society or we're working towards an inclusive society. If we even leave out CSE for a minute. So and I love that we are taking up the space and the time to discuss all of these different dimensions, because a lot of times maybe sessions are able to only focus on one, but the fact that Dr. Madhura could bring all of us together kind of allows us to do more exploration in each and every field or each and every aspect of it. And of course, as four different people, we're all bound to have some perspective which may be not the same for all of us, and that's something new maybe we can bring to the table.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like as femme presenting people, like so much of our worth is also tied to our reproductive capability, which means that, hey, like there's also this external pressure to become moms, right, in some capacity.
yeah,
So I think it's very interesting for us to explore that from that perspective, as well, not just as professionals but also people with lived experiences,
right.
wherein, like, motherhood is a feature, and what does that mean for us? So I'm going to attempt
Yeah,
to add Madhura, and I'm also Dr. Madhura, who's a psychiatrist, and I'm also going to add Zoya, who is a reproductive health scientist, to discuss something so fascinating. And like you said, Artika, super grateful to Dr. Madhura for inviting us into this conversation and just this line of thought.
Guys.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi.
Hi, we were just singing your praises, Madhura, for like coming up with such a cool topic.
Yay.
Welcome, Zoya. I know also, like, you are someone who's very interested in not necessarily always the biological way, so to say, of reproduction, and just like reproduction in general, and that's such a broad, expansive topic than the way we otherwise perceive it as. So I think it'll be a very cool conversation for all of us to have.
Absolutely.
Great. Then let's just jump straight into it. I think maybe we could go around talking about what do you perceive as motherhood and how do you think that sort of evolved over time? And Madhura, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. I think the concept of motherhood has definitely evolved in the last couple of decades. I mean, I guess the whole identification of a woman and femininity with being a mother is now being a little dissociated. I wouldn't say it's completely forgotten or it's completely let go of, but I feel it's still it has many layers to it that it needs to uncover. But I guess overall, with more working women, more independent women, and or any person, to be honest, trying to include parenthood in their lifestyle, not as the whole and sole purpose of their life, but just a part of their life, I feel is has taken a new direction. And I guess pet parenthood, adoption, using different techniques to become parents, I think has become more inclusive and opened up various horizons for parenthood in general. So I am very happy and excited to see where this moves forward.
Yeah, just quick follow up. Have you noticed any trends in terms of like how people may also be thinking about their own mental health when it comes to becoming parents potentially? Is that something that's happened?
I feel that actually, retrospectively speaking, if you are born into a home where you're not completely welcome, especially mothers who are not sure with whether they are ready or not to have a child, but they're just keeping the pregnancy because of that accidental incident, I feel that takes a huge toll on the child itself. I mean, being born and raised in an environment where you're not completely accepted. Having said that, even for the mother, it increases the chances of postpartum mental health issues when the stress and the depressive features are very, very more common in people having unwanted pregnancies than planned pregnancies. So yes, that is a very important aspect, and mental health of people in general who are planning to becoming parents is very, very important.
For highlighting that. Zoya, what's your take on this? Do you feel like motherhood has changed? Like, also someone who works very closely in this space of, potentially helping people become moms who were touted to not be able to. What's your take on this?
Like you said, I think with new technology, we have a lot of different ways. We have basically family structures have changed. There's a lot of people, like who are biologically the same sex who could technically not have shared that sort of journey of motherhood otherwise, easily, can now with these technologies essentially get that opportunity. So I feel like that's an aspect of fertility treatment that I personally am really interested in. So you can see and you understand when you hear their stories that motherhood is not just coming down to genetics, that it's not just that's my biological child, because you have these really cool technologies where they can actually carry each other's genetic, like the embryo, they kind of switch it between between both parents. So it's building that family. And like Madhura said, there's adoption, there's so many other options. Your family parenthood is not down to genetics. And I think that's something that we're all sort of coming to terms with. Yes, definitely. When you come into like these settings, you'll still find people who'll be like, no. I want to have my own biological child, my own, they should be related to me. But again, that perception is changing. There's a lot of people who are going in for donor cycles. So I feel like there's this general change that's coming in. Yeah, it's exciting to see new aspects and things of society, I guess.
Yeah, also, I mean, in the light, let's say, opportunities like social egg freezing as well, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know what's your hot take as an anthropologist and also a sex educator and a menstrual health educator who works in this constant space of like, oh, fertility and like motherhood, and what's your take on this?
I mean, I love everything that Madhura and Zoya had to say, and I think they've largely covered, what it exists as in a lot of societies right now and what it traditionally has existed as, right? The concept of motherhood. And absolutely right, like you said, fertility is treated as something that's sacred, and the lack of it is treated as something that's not, right? Like it's treated as something that one should be ashamed of. So I think coming sort of from that space and just kind of trying to figure out what motherhood really, even would be, for me, I feel like it goes beyond the capacity of being able to give birth. And this is not at all to negate the effort that goes into somebody who's giving birth, who's having a biological child, or not at all negating their experience, but at the same time saying that motherhood will not come by default just because you've given birth. And motherhood can come even if you've not given biological birth. And this goes both ways, because this is also like the concept of motherhood, it's sort of like by giving birth, they then hold it as a standard and say, oh, XYZ is a good mom or mother, like this is such an arbitrary standard that's created again by society, where they feel like, oh, if somebody can have a biological child, they must by default have, some, as if motherhood is a thing that you can have. And just speaking about motherhood in general, I think it's a set of things, but it's not a standard set of things. So what it means to me, and what my subset has, could be very different from what your set has. And a lot of it depends on our experiences. And imagining it as a set of things, it is something that can exist with a person who's not giving birth biologically. And, it can be learned by somebody who's not giving birth biologically. Like, you don't have to have it. Of course, I think we've spoken about this before, that some of us feel like we have certain maternal feelings. And that's different. Just because you maybe don't have those feelings doesn't mean motherhood is not for you. So I feel like lots of rules have been drawn around it, which, from time to time can negatively affect people and have negatively affected people. Also, like, just to talk about the choice that one has, right? Like, you have the choice to want to give birth or not want to give birth. And then post that choice is the question of motherhood. So I just feel like it's not as interlinked as maybe it's been portrayed to us, if that makes sense. Like, definitely there can be links. But, like we say, motherhood is a social construct. Yes. Which does not mean that it's not real, but it means that it is largely dictated by the society. I would love to add to that.
Right. No, fully aligned with you, right? Also, the bit that you said about being maternal, I identify personally as a very maternal person. I really enjoy in giving the kind of care and the kind of nurturing that is expected of a romanticize the sacrifice and the pain, etc. But at the same time, I mean, I'm sure like all of us will agree that like our moms are such cuties, right? So I feel like, like there's an element of like being maternal, which is almost expected of people who've been assigned female at birth and people who identify as women. Whereas it's not the same when it comes to, let's say, other genders, right? Like, or other gender expression. So I think like that's also like motherhood can also be embodied by folks of other genders. And I think like that's also like something sort of worth exploring. No, the other thing that you sort of brought up was the pressures that come with being a mom, right? And the expectations that come with being a mom, which, Madhura, you also briefly touched upon as to how like you do notice that there's been a shift in a way that people perceive that kind of pressure. But at the same time, I also wonder, is that in our very privileged slice of society? Is that in our very, English-speaking, urban, certain caste class location? So yeah, I'm curious to learn from you as to, what do you think about this pressure that is there to either become mums or to embody that maternalistic tendencies as a woman? Yeah, so how do you think it impacts a person?
Just adding a little bit to your concept of maternal instincts, I completely agree. I mean, I just want to add that maternal instincts themselves could be very sectional as well. I mean, I feel that I am very maternal towards my pet. I have a pup, and all my maternal instincts do come out when I am taking care of him, and but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same towards a child. Or some people are inherently quite maternal, even as friends, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be the caretaker of the entire group or their family. So I feel that is very, very important in general. Speaking of the pressures that women do face even now, even in privileged societies, I feel the moment you do look into partnership and come out to the world with your partner, there's sort of this unspoken expectation that, okay, now this is what is going to happen. They are going to get married and they're going to have kids, and it becomes so eased into the part of a conversation on a day-to-day basis that when your kids arrive, this will happen, and when your kids arrive. So I feel it is very important to, right from the beginning, make it, sort of known to each and every party involved that that may not be the case in every couple, and that may not, happen in our case, and it should not come as a shock to you. I remember having this conversation with my mother, a couple of years ago, that I don't necessarily think I want to have children in the future. And as a very typical Indian mother, I got a reaction that, yaar, ek to kar lo, kya hota hai? One is fine and one will be taken care of. I will take care of it and everything. But it took me a while to let her into the ideology that a child is not just something you bring into your home, and it's a very aspect of your being, and you with your partner should be the main responsible couple or individual raising that child. Because if I wanted my mother to raise a child, I would have asked for a sibling and not my own kid, right? So I feel even in privilege, the privilege that we come with, things have not necessarily changed. In fact, I feel I have seen a shift in the rural areas where previously reproduction used to be just an expansion of farming and the household business, because they needed more workers and more people taking care of the land. That concept has shifted now, because younger people are taking things into consideration, whether or not I can feed these many children, whether or not I can educate them and actually take care of them. And I feel that shift has taken place at a very, very right and crucial time. But I don't think the privilege really protects us from the expectations.
No, 100%, absolutely saying that. And I'm sure like the four of us at one point or the other have heard from someone, married, children, and like, I mean, that is just inevitable no matter, your social strata and, where you hail from. I think my internet is my Wi-Fi. Hopefully that helps.
Me, I think Apurupa, you're the only one who's freezing.
Oh no, okay, cool. Can't hear you. Thought trap says so. Fine. Maybe you'll hear us better now. I don't know. We'll try. No, so Badra, I was just commenting on how it's very interesting that you bring up like the rural setup and like how maybe in societies where folks necessarily can't afford child rearing for so many children. I think it's very interesting that you bring up that perspective as well. And I wonder whether the choice is so much from younger folks and people being educated as much as it's sort of imposed. Like just life has gotten more expensive. Um, if it's from there. No, I think like point taken, and I do correct it when you say that. Yeah, this pressure, like and like you rightly phrased it in our conversation, that motherhood is viewed as this ultimate destination, right? Yeah. What do you think, Kartika? What do you think about this? About it? Because I know that you work with the rural population a lot. I know that you are going back, if I'm not wrong, very soon to work with women and to talk to them
Yeah.
about very issue.
I already did.
Oh, you already
Yeah.
did.
No,
Gee,
I was just yeah, last week. Yeah. No,
I
I was just waiting to kind of chip in a little bit here because definitely what Madhura brought into the picture is one perspective where um, planning a child or planned birth has become an important aspect that's being practiced by more and more people because life is expensive. It's expensive to raise a child, and I guess in the planning of the birth, it starts from maybe starting with like birth control contraception, then maybe being like, okay, removing the birth control, then childbirth, then the expenses for school, expenses for college, all of that is accounted for. And a lot of people are practicing that. But I also do feel like the whole concept of planning a birth is very, very, is something that can only be practiced by people who have a certain level of privilege. Of course, this is not like, when I say privilege, it could mean education, that they know that they can plan something like this. It definitely means resources as well, that based on their resources, they will or will not, birth a child. Um, but I also do like bringing back the whole rural aspect of it. I still feel like a lot of people who live in rural or semi-rural communities don't have these privileges. Again, neither education nor economic resources nor financial resources. At the same time, more children are viewed as more hands put to work in within their family. So because they don't think, okay, like we'll have to invest in school. A lot of times they don't, and that's just the hard reality. Like, and this is not shaming somebody, but this is just what the situation really is. And of course, the government runs massive campaigns on a plan on like planning your childbirth and talking about having two child policy or two children policy. But all of these things are only will only get into a society which is permeable to such information. And a lot of times, again, I will also speak from my experience, which is very, very centered to North India, for example. But if I talk about overall stats in India, then the uh, urban Indian society is moving towards lesser childbirths per woman, because the stats are very, very heteronormative, versus in rural and semi-rural communities where childbirth per person is higher. And yeah, I guess another thing which of course you said that and you shared your personal experience, so thank you so much for sharing that, because I'm sure there must have been a lot of viewers who would have identified with this, where where maybe if you're somebody who is somebody who's maybe looking to have a child, or you're having some kind of pressure from your family for having a child, and then someone will say, okay, I'll take care of them, or like as the grandparent, I'll take care of them. And I'm sure that so many people must have identified with that example. But I guess coming back to our topic on motherhood, yes, definitely it is. If you're in a cis-het relationship, it is the parents' responsibility, if you want to say, to raise that child. At the same time, I feel like this responsibility can be taken by anyone who wants to take the responsibility. And yes, the ultimate choice definitely lies with you, but I think that's where I want to talk about the concept of motherhood as something that can actually belong to someone who may not be the biological mother, even if it's a grandparent. You know, if that's making sense. And you know, just like coming back to that, I would just want to ask you, so that we can move this forward, you know, keeping that in sort of mind, what do we feel about what is even the function of motherhood? Like, why must motherhood exist? Right now, we just spoke about separating motherhood from maternal instincts and talked about separating motherhood from the biological act of giving birth. So, what are we looking at motherhood as? Like, what is the function for motherhood? And I'd love to start with Zoya, because I think we've just been talking. She's just been listening.
Also,
No,
Zoya, if you could.
Sorry, I don't want to put you on the spot, but
Wait, what were you saying?
I just had like a quick follow-up for Zoya, even before she answers the.
I'm scared.
I'd love to light on, you know, if we do then talk about motherhood as a choice, and I'd love to.
Can't hear.
Follow-ups are meant to be asked later.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. I can hear you now. She's not saying anything, but I can hear her.
Oh, great. Tommy, fantastic. I'm so happy.
Okay, let's go. Quick.
Okay. So I quickly wanted.
Oh, she froze again.
And if we speak about my choice, then I'd love to hear from you as to whether it's a real choice. Like, can I change my mind 10 years from now? Like, I'm almost 30. Can I decide to be a mum at 40? And love to hear you throw some light on that as well.
So I think that's a really interesting question, and I really wanted to bring that sort of perspective here, and that's something that I do, again, feel very, very strongly about, that although we're all here, you know, living our lives, doing everything we want to do, and we're not ready to have kids, you know, but we need to understand that unfortunately, or fortunately, we're biologically made in that sort of way where we're born with all the eggs. Anyone who's assigned female at birth will be born with all the eggs that they ever have. And there are experimental techniques where we're trying to do new things, but as I said, they're experimental. So for the general population, it's what it is. And what we don't realize, because we're never taught, is every single choice that you make, every single lifestyle choice throughout your life, is your body is going to remember. It's not that you had 5 drinks and 3 hangovers and you forgot it, so your body is going to forget it. You know what I mean? All of these, everything that you do through your life will be remembered. And instead of saying, I'm not ready to be to go down that route, you should say, okay, this is where I'm at right now. I need to have an assessment. I need to understand where I'm at. And there's a lot of like fertility analysis that can be done. Obviously, not, you know, they give you like a ballpark figure. It's not like a, okay, fine, you sure shot have like 5 years, 10 years, whatever. You know, it'll give you a ballpark figure where you'll be like, okay, fine, I know that I have that much time left, and then I can make this decision. What a lot of people forget is that they say parenthood, I'm going to leave it on the back, the back burner, and I'm going to think about it later on. But what we don't realize is sometimes when you reach that later on stage, you don't have the option. And then you don't have a choice. Then this is what it is. And you could go, and it's not something that's new. Even in fertility clinics, there are a lot of people who come up who don't have the option. And that's the reality, that they will come, they'll probably not have enough eggs, or they won't have, it's not viable. They'd have to go through other options. So I'd say know your options. Understand that this is how we're built. But you don't want to do it, then make an informed choice. Make sure you're like, okay, fine, I'm willing to take that choice. I'm willing to understand that if I don't want to have kids at this age and I want to have them then, I can either be proactive. I can look at something like freezing, or I can understand that there's risks of having a child at a later age. And it's not just the fact that you could have difficulty conceiving, but there's also increased risk for the person who's at pregnancy, as opposed to, just in a heteronormative couple, say the assigned male at birth. So these are things that you need to understand, which is unfortunately not really spoken about. It's always been like, okay, have kids at a younger age, but it's fine. Parenthood is your own choice. I've always said, do whatever you want, but make an informed decision. It shouldn't be that you've landed up in a fertility clinic and then someone's telling you that you should have made this choice when you were, say, in your mid-20s, and now you're like mid-30s and you're like, I can't do anything now. Do something when you can make a choice. When you have a choice, not like this is your option.
So do you suggest, just sorry to barge in, but do you suggest every person who may or may not want to seek pregnancy in the future should go to a fertility specialist and, consider the option of freezing their eggs?
Say you go to your specialist and see what they say, because everyone is individual. Even if you take 4 of us in this room and you put us together, and even if you make us live the same lifestyles, because we're built different, our outcomes will be different. You give us the same pill, the same food, the same everything, it'll be very different. Again, with freezing, it's better. Like, the best chances are obviously, say, mid-20s to early 30s, but that doesn't mean there will be people who'll come up, a little later, who can still have success out of these treatments. It's very subjective. You need to go. It's best to go. It's best to have an analysis done and then decide what you want to do. Again, coming to the point that these procedures are expensive. So, you need, it's not, unfortunately, it's not accessible to everyone. Even in a public system, a lot of it is not funded. So in a privatized system, are you really in a position to be able to put that chunk of money away at, when you're that early in your career? These are things which people need to sort of think of.
No, thank you so much for sharing that information with us. And also, I love the idea of just consulting a fertility specialist if you think that this is something that you may consider at some point. Just having a conversation. I feel like that's how healthcare should in general be, where we can have these conversations with experts who will help us make informed decisions on these topics. Wait, I'm frozen again. I'm back. Fine, we're gonna make this work. Madhura, I wanted to ask you a bit about motherhood again. Like Zoya said, it's not a possibility for everybody. Now, this could be because, hey, like, I'm not able to biologically give birth to.
Right. I kind of had to derive what you were trying to ask because it was quite jumbled up, but I think I got the gist of it. So, I mean, like we discussed, that motherhood in general is quite of a bit of a social construct, and the association of a woman or a person to be a mother, it has been so deeply imbibed in our brains that a lot of people kind of associate themselves or identify themselves just as mothers and not an entire individual. So when you give that amount of great deal of importance to something, and at the end when you've been hearing all your life, and you've been growing up in an environment where you've been told that okay, this is the ultimate destination, or this is what you have to do when you grow up, when you reach that point and you realize that you can't do it, you can't actually execute that, it is going to be extremely painful and disappointing for that person in general. Also, people who may not be anatomically equipped to bear a child, but identify themselves as mothers and want to be, a mother to someone. With the lack of availability of many choices, or I guess the options that are still being provided in our country especially, I feel that there's a lot of scope still ahead of us where we can make it more inclusive for people, probably non-binary people or gender queer people, or just a homosexual couple who wants to bear a child, and maybe a genetically or a biological child, and not go in for adoption. I have a couple of people in my family who have adopted, and I know the process is not that simple. They have a lot of prerequisites and a lot of criteria for you to be able to adopt. I also know couples who have moved back from different countries to our country just so they will be allowed to adopt. So it's a huge struggle for people to eventually reach a point of parenthood, I feel. But as we said, that the more mental health professionals or professionals in general, medical professionals, become more inclusive and start talking about these topics, the very reason why I chose to speak about it will just make the general public aware as to what is to be done, and as to how we can proceed in the future if we do decide to adapt something like this in our relationship or our life. And I feel the four of us coming together speaking about it is just one step into what can be done. And the more we talk about it, the more we include such conversations and normalize such conversations, I feel that is going to lead to a lot of positive changes in the society.
I also think our conversation or our entire series would be incomplete if we didn't acknowledge patriarchy at least once, every time, because it exists. Yeah. And like, how can you not see it? And like Aparupa mentioned, grief, which comes from somebody not biologically being able to bear a child, and like all of that goes back to the start of society and to patriarchy being very, very real, where the birth giver was without any options and without any permission taken from that person or approval taken from that person, was just attached to the child and was just attached to the responsibility of raising that child in every way. And I guess that was, I guess to me, that is where the concept of motherhood being so deeply entangled with giving birth must have begun. And also just the whole sadly the whole horrible view of bringing down someone who's assigned female at birth, their entire identity, to being able to give birth. And a lot of times this same very negative practice is wrapped in a cute little wrapper of positive something, toxicity, let's call it, where it's like, oh my god, you're blessed that you can give birth. Said like, oh my god, like God has only women and like men can't give birth, and kind of placed in every everybody's head as this big blessing that you've gotten from God, where if you are somebody who decides not to give birth, it's a shame, and you're bringing shame to yourself and to your entire family. And if you're somebody who is not being able to give birth, due to various factors that can exist, and uh, uh, then again, it's like a failure on your part. And I guess when it comes to adoption as well, of course, a lot of times people may choose to adopt because they actively make the choice to not want to have a biological child. But a lot of times people look towards adoption only after they have tried the biological method and maybe, for whatever reason, not been able to. Again, in that case, I feel like the blame, if one of the partners, if there are partners and one of the partners is assigned female at birth, the blame goes entirely to the person who would have carried the child, and is seen as a failure on their part. So I guess there's just so much inbuilt notion which causes this grief, and this shame doesn't only exist from the outside, but it's sometimes very, very internalized as well. So, if you're somebody who's not being able to conceive, you may feel like you're letting your partner down, or you may feel like you're letting your family down. And I mean, like, definitely we have Aprupa and Madhura both, that kind of internalized guilt. How could that be healthy for you? You're so caught up about a child who doesn't yet exist, and you're doing that at the cost of your own mental health. And I guess I would just take this one moment to say that this is not to bash people who decide to have a child or decide to raise a child or adopt a child, but we're just trying to bring into the conversation some of the things that are not talked about, or some of the ways we feel like the concept is used to abuse people, instead of other things that it should be used for.
I'm just so afraid to speak because I feel like my connection will drop, which it has, I'm guessing. I'm not sure. So I would shut up, and these incredible women make very intelligent
No, we
points.
can hear you now quite well,
Okay.
actually.
We'll just go ahead with it, and if it stops, it stops, and one of you will take over, of course. No, I think these are such interesting explorations because they're ranging from, what is motherhood? Is it being maternal? Is it really a choice? What are my choices? What if my choices fail? How do I process sort of the emotions that are around it? What about like internalized guilt and shame? Touching upon the whole gamut, which is when it is not a real choice and you do bring in a child when you're not ready, you're actually doing more harm than you're doing good, and you're actually only doing harm to the child, right? And we see that in various ways, like passing on of intergenerational trauma. You see like young children being like identified, and them having to be the caregivers of their parents who were not ready to be put in that place and because like some biological clock is ticking, which it is ticking, like Zoya reminded us, and that's a reality. But at
Sorry, I'm not.
No.
I feel like I'm
it's
the flag bearer of
important
hell.
right? No. It's important to acknowledge that as well, because if that's a choice I want to make 10 years from now, it is going to be 10 times more difficult, and that is something that I should be privy to, and then I still go ahead and make the choice, but I should know that information. So no, not at all. I'm joking, right? I think yeah. So I think it's also like when we talk about motherhood and very counterproductive to what Artika was proposing, to separate motherhood and being maternal from an actual child. But those three are in fact actually quite intertwined as well. So yeah, so I think like, yeah, if we do want to sort of stop this cycle, then a conversation on whether am I ready to be the kind of caregiver that you need to be to a child. I think that conversation definitely has to happen. So I also wonder, like, would the alternative, how like in all these movies they show like when do like a trial version and then like actually decide whether I want to go ahead with it. What are your thoughts, Madhura? I know that you are a pet parent, if I'm not wrong. Is that like almost a prep for an actual child? I know that I'll get so much hate for this comment, but it's really asking you a very specific question.
No hate, because that's the thing. I mean, when I call myself a pet parent, I do not think of it as a net practice for an actual child. I consider this as my actual child. So if you think of me, I am already a mother, and I do not have to bear or give birth to be recognized as a mother. And I feel when we talk about emotional neglect, like you mentioned, when we talk about bringing in a child in a home where it is not completely welcome, you also need to consider the resentment, the amount of resentment you will have in the future if the child, of course, does not turn out to be, mentally stable, or eventually starts resenting you as a mother because of the emotional neglect that the child had to face during their childhood. You resenting the family that kind of pushed you towards having that child, you resenting your partner. There's so many aspects to it that we need to consider. And actually that brings me to my question also, that if you are in a relationship and one of the partners wants to have a child, let's say a heterosexual or a homosexual relationship, you want a child but the other one is not completely sure, would it be something that you would want to move ahead with? I want to know, Apurupa, what are your thoughts on that?
For me, I someone who doesn't necessarily want a child right now. We don't know what it's going to be like later, but I can only operate from my present realities, which are these. But definitely going to take Zoya's advice and just speak to a fertility specialist, see what's going on there. I think that was
anyway.
No, I think that was super important for me.
Like, yeah.
A financial expert if I was intending on buying a flat, right? And I think like this, it's almost like that, right? So no, thank you for that. Like it's really stayed with me. But yeah, so because I'm somebody who doesn't necessarily, yeah, sorry, Zoya, were you saying something?
No, I'm sorry, you're lagging. Go ahead.
Right. Okay. No,
go ahead.
I'll quickly complete and pass on the mic so that like it doesn't lag and anyone can speak. So I think it would, for me, Madhura, be, of course there'll be like space for conversation and feels how, and it's not going to be like, oh, like you want one, I don't want to buy. Obviously it's not going to be like that. I hope I'm more emotionally intelligent than that, but I think in my head it's quite clear that we'll have to be aligned on how we do parenthood, and how we imagine our lives with or without children. I think I'm going to throw it back to you. What about you? Because you had a whole conversation with your mom.
I think on the first, like I'm engaged and my fiance and I on the first date, thank you. The whole reason for us to move forward with it, kids, no. That was that. I mean, it was that simple. And we knew right from the beginning that we were on the same page. No shame or no hate towards people who want and love to have kids, but it was so important for me to know that eventually when we start thinking of a future, this is not some conversation that we are going to need to have, that whether or not you want kids in your future, because it was right off the table. And I feel that kind of conversation is so very important for people looking for a serious relationship or a commitment, or anyone who's trying to get into something new. I feel the basic principles, it is taken for granted so many times that okay, you are getting into a relationship, you are going to procreate and you're just going to have children. So for people like me who lie on the opposite spectrum of it, I feel it becomes sort of necessary for me to bring it up in the conversation, especially if it is in front of someone I am expecting or thinking of spending my life with. And luckily for me, it worked out, and that's how we proceeded. But yes, I don't think I would have been able to proceed with that much convenience and comfort if this conversation wouldn't have taken that early on. So yeah, I do feel it is very, very important talking about it.
Yeah, fully agreed. I think we have a which is from Gauri, who asks, how can we talk about these procedures to our family about unconventional motherhood possibilities? Zoya, would you like to take that up? Is that something that happens where folks come with their families?
Wait, I'm looking for the question. What is the question again?
It's I think in that separate section of questions. I don't think it's in the comments.
Wait, how can we talk about it? Okay. Again, like it comes down to, first I wanted to address, as Apurupa said, this is where I'm at in my space, like in my life right now. And I want to really just quickly touch upon that our expectations out of life change with age. Not even age, with just experiences. So if today you're saying, okay, this is not what I want, tomorrow it could be something completely different. And I see that in my own life. Like even 2 years back, what I wanted to do was very different from what I wanted to do today, and might be extremely different from what I want to do tomorrow. And something like fertility, unfortunately, does not always give us that option. So to make sure that you have just a sort of safety net is something that I would always suggest to someone who's saying, I don't want to do this right now. It's your choice. But at least know that you have the option, which I've been like harping on for the last every minute. I've been like, no, you have the option. No, you have, but it's so important. And we see, like, I'm just gonna come back to the whole LGBTQ healthcare, where there are cases of people who've transitioned, who in the moment, completely digressing, sorry, but in the moment they said, we don't want to undergo fertility preservation, so we don't want to freeze our eggs, we don't want to freeze our sperm, we don't want to do anything, and have come back after 5 years or 10 years and said, we want to have children now. And unfortunately, for you to have your biological child at that point, for a lot of them, was not possible. And that's what it really scares me, that everyone should have an option. To have or not to have a child is like a fundamental right. It's your choice. It shouldn't be forced upon you. But also coming to unconventional things, it's not easy. Again, it's new, like you said, like Apurupa, sorry, not Apurupa, like Artika said. We're brought up with this sort of ideology where if you are fertile, you can have kids, great. If you can't, you're sort of failing something. And I think to first explain to people that that's not the case. There's a lot of people who are undergoing fertility treatment. And that's not anyone's particular fault. It's the lifestyles we live, it's the environment we live in, and just generally, our reproductive systems aren't built like that. The reason we have all this is because we're not particularly built to be like, okay, we're gonna have 10 kids. That you have is, you have having a donor cycle. It's something like that.
I think Apurupa's freeze again.
Artika, while we are talking on this, I do have a question for you. You have been working, with rural and semi-urban women. Have you ever met someone who has sort of expressed the idea of not having a child, or not being, open to the idea of motherhood? Have you seen area since you are from there?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And just to, before I even answer, I haven't worked with any tribal groups yet. Hopefully in the future, but no, and that's exactly where I was answering the privilege question from. That times where people said that they didn't want to at that particular age, at the age that they had. There was, it's almost like it's not an option for them. Almost function of their marriage, and I do want to talk about that aspect as well. It's almost as if the function of their marriage is to produce a progeny, which brings me to like also a whole different aspect of motherhood. So of course there are also people who may not seek marriage and who might still want to give birth, or who still might want to practice motherhood, for example. And you know what Zoya said, that like it's about understanding what your goal is. So is your goal that, okay, yeah, I do want to be in a long-term relationship, maybe a marriage, and a child is something that me and my partners want to have, and that's sort of our shared space, and a child is something we want to raise, someone we want to raise. And or your goal is that I want to have a child, and that's how I express my emotions. And it is a tool for that as well. Like motherhood is a tool for expressing your emotions as well. So your goal could be either. And if for me, for example, if my goal is that, oh, I do want to have a child, and I want to raise a child, and I want to give good life to a child, where do I fall on the whole spectrum? In a place where adoption will become very, very difficult as a single parent, where biological process may be supported, as well as if I go for ART, if I might be supported by technology, but I will not be supported by society, or even legally supported by the country I live in, let's say. So and that was like the reason why I was even intending to say that while all of them are interlinked and they can be existing as such for many people, they may exist as separate entities as well, if that makes sense. And that's like 100% sometimes what I feel about, like, for example, myself, that maybe I do want a long-term relationship as well, but even if that's not something, I feel like I do want a child, for example. So where does that leave me? Like, is there space for somebody like me and many other people who may feel this way? And yeah, that was the answer to your question. But just quickly, I just want to say something, which I was thinking that when Zoya was speaking, that I think this entire ticking clock of ours has just been painted in such a bad light. But like, let's reclaim it, and let's reclaim it as something that is actually just aimed at empowering themselves with information, because the fact that your body is changing as you age, and is just fact, right? Like nothing or no one can take away the fact. But a lot of times when the clock is ticking, is said to you in a way that is questioning your lifestyle choices, that's how it gets that negative light, when it's just a simple fact, and that you should know, and you could work around it, and you can take whatever path that fits you best. So I think it's almost become like such a joke which has a negative connotation, because so many people have heard it being said to them over and over again vis-a-vis their lifestyle choices, that, oh, you're still working and your clock is ticking. It doesn't
I love that.
like that, but
I love it because I feel like, if someone, we've always been conditioned to be like, your clock is ticking, so this is it. If someone brought it up in a decent way and said, like you said, this is the fact, this is it, you make your choice.
Yeah.
Stated the facts in a decent way. And it's not just society, it's also a lot of like healthcare professionals who do that.
Absolutely.
If you go into a clinic, they'll be like, have a child. And you're like, I don't want to have a child. My life. They'll be like that. Once you like reach that sort of age, they'll be like, now you should have a child. Why are you not having a child? No, you support people. If you really want to care about someone, you shouldn't be intrusive about their life choices. You should support their life choices. Obviously, if they're doing something absolutely batshit crazy, then you stand there and you're like, okay, hello, we need a reality check as well. But like you said, we need to sort of, I think, change that narrative to be like, make an informed decision instead of being like, oh God, I don't want to have this conversation, because it is a reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, also like, I don't know if y'all can hear me, but I'll just attempt to talk.
Yeah.
Quickly also want to address the social capital that comes with being a parent. There is a lot.
I love how when she reaches the main topic, her voice starts breaking. Like until then, it's all smooth.
Drop moment. What? Can you hear me now?
Why don't you text the question in the box?
I was just going to say that, but that's really... I didn't want to be mean.
I'm not being mean. I'm really not being mean. I do this on, I'm literally her on every work call because I'm like,
Apurupa, you need to add 2 things to your list now. Get a generator and a new Wi-Fi.
Oh my God, no, my Wi-Fi was fine. Is it any better now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's better now. Yeah.
But
okay, I'm going to quickly, very quickly. It wasn't a question. It was a great point that I was making. Okay. No, now you're frozen again, aren't you? No.
No, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Oh, you can. Oh, you can. Great. No, I just wanted to, just take a moment here and also acknowledge the social capital that comes with parenthood. And especially as a cishet person, if you are a parent, especially the parent of a male child, you are then sitting at the center of the charmed circle, right? And there is that element which may also push you to consider parenthood. The fact that you may not directly think of it like that, obviously, that this will afford me a lot more privileges. But this whole idea that, oh, that person has a child and look at them take their child to like school, for instance, like the capitalistic society is also set up in such a way that it validates. I think like, Atika, we bring this up literally every session, but, it's also in such a way that it does validate individual spending units, which come from families. So, yeah, I also wanted to, just talk about how it does come with social capital. And if you are someone who wants that type of social capital and just like validation among your friends and family, and you have the thought that is able to sort of help you fulfill that dream, I feel like it's okay for you to make that choice. But I think like Madhura would remind us, it's not just a choice that you're then making for yourself, it's also a choice that you're making for another human being. So maybe a question worth exploring, and maybe like the solution is to also then speak with a mental health professional before you consider parenthood, right? Somebody has a great comment and I have to read it out.
I
mean, I've been trying to control my laughter throughout the session, but this just cracked me up. This has been
comes and goes with time.
If we just send hearts, we send you hearts. It's a unit.
How do I will send a heart? You know what? Here you go. That was such a great joke.
Yeah, I guess we can do
this. Okay, so
I'm following up to that.
Sorry, please go ahead.
No, you continue. You get very rare chances of speaking smoothly.
I know, so right? I was gonna like throw it back at you only to be like, is that something that people have done? Like, has someone ever come to you and been like, hey, I'm potentially, considering being not necessarily someone who's been diagnosed with a mental health issue, right? Like maybe in such a situation, they may actually come to you and be like, hey, considering motherhood, etc. Has there been someone who's not necessarily received a diagnosis, doesn't necessarily think they're living with a mental health issue, but they've come to you and they've spoken to you about, is this a choice? Like, how do I make this informed choice?
So actually, I have had someone come to me saying, not getting a particular diagnosis per se, but just coming to me and saying that, you know what, a lot of people in my peers have had children, and me and my partner have not, and that makes me feel like I'm doing something wrong because I am slowly dissociating from them. We are not invited to certain functions anymore, and we are not, included in just some conversations anymore. And I have felt that personally also, that when you call yourself a pet parent, it's just sort of looked down upon. That okay, that's not real parenthood, and I do honestly feel that the more inclusive we are with I guess any form of parenthood that we see around us, I feel that is just going to normalize not having children in the future. The more we normalize that, yes, when you I think there's this scene in The Office, I think, when Oscar and Pam and Angela, I don't know who are Office fans here, but I'm just gonna narrate it anyway. When the assistant Pam and Angela are both pregnant, and they form this trio of people, and they're gossiping, like against everyone. And there's this scene where two people are talking, that she talks about her cats like they're her children, and that's not what they are. You cannot compare your cats to your children. And I realized that it is still sort of taken into consideration that no, parenthood has to have these clear demarcations, that whom you're being parents to matters what kind of parents you are and how serious parents you are. Like, if probably you are a parent to a biological child, you're the most dignified parent of them all. And probably if you have had a child by IVF or adoption, or then later on comes your parents to a pet, I think the hierarchy of the situation needs to be abolished on some level to kind of equate and include all sorts of parents into the equation.
Yeah,
And I
I
also
think
feel like
most of
I just want to quickly add to that. I remember what seems like aeons back, Apurupa asked if being a pet parent was sort of like the first stage. And I'll tell you, like, obviously, like, I have pets of my own and I absolutely love them. But I'll tell you what an absolutely fun first stage was for me personally. My nephew looks very cute till he throws a tantrum. And then I think in my mind that I'm like, I can literally walk out this house and go back home and I don't have to take him home. Am I willing to take the tantrum home?
Excuse me, I'm so sorry.
Is something, and then I'm like, would I be able to deal with that? I feel like a lot of people, like, pet parenting is a completely different aspect. But definitely, like, when if you think about it, look at kids, see if you can actually be with them. What's the point of having a child if you don't want to raise it? Which I think Madhura said right in the beginning. If you wanted your grandparents, I feel like in desi structures where it's so thinky, your grandmom will look after you or someone will look after you, and it's like that. But if you want to have a child, you raise that child, you get support. But don't have a child unless you know fully well you're willing to give your time and not just your money. A lot of people forget that time is what a child needs. Money is definitely important, but time.
And that level of nurturing is so necessary, I guess, because now 18, 20 years later, we are seeing the after effects of, uh, we're seeing the after effects of the children who have grown up with their grandparents, and now after a certain point when they have matured and become adults, the parents have decided that okay, they should continue living with us now because the grandparents have become too old or too sick to take care of them. And that shift in the paradigm creates so much stress and behavioral issues with the children. So there's this entirely different conversation happening in the chats, which I'm having such FOMO about. I want to be a part of it. I don't want to talk about children anymore. I want to be.
No, please. I think like what you're talking about. Sorry. I'm just a petulant child. How am I ever going to like care for a child? But yeah, I'm just like, oh, this person's making such important points. I'll just like say things in the comments. No, forgive me, please, please, mother. I think especially like about the repercussions of being raised by not necessarily your parents, maybe nannies, maybe grandparents. I'd love for you to talk about like the psychological impact of that.
I mean, for the child, whoever is nurturing them and providing them with the care in the formative years of their life, do become the identifying parents for them. And suddenly one day you're shifted from their house and taken away and taken to your biological parents and told that okay, these are the people who are going to take care of you now. And that kind of shift and that kind of trauma is not something that you're prepared for, when because you have grown up in a certain environment and you've grown up with certain values which completely change as you move into a different household. And the adjustment not just is difficult for the child in itself but for the parents as well. And the parents come to us saying that the child is having difficulty adjusting, the child is having issues with the sibling who probably was raised with the parents themselves. There's so much feeling of abandonment, a feeling of neglect, a feeling of, in general, being unwanted, that creates such a huge impact on your mental health. And I feel that is not something that we need to take lightly, because it comes very easily to parents in general just to say that yes, we will raise them, but the repercussions of that are very, very severe if you come to look at them.
No, I absolutely agree. Like, I was raised by my grandmom. And not like, it's very funny, but I feel like life has come a full circle now. She sort of raised me, and now it's the other way around. Like, I'm sort of looking after her. Like, I feel like that's another aspect of, say, motherhood. It's like, you did this for me, I'm doing this for you, which we don't see. And like you said, like, I feel like, it's different, obviously. And I wouldn't say it's, like, in today's time and age, people have to work. You cannot afford to live these lifestyles if only one person is working. So again, it comes down to make sure you actually want this, and don't just get pressurized because society does it.
Artika has been too quiet for too long now.
No, I've just been listening to you. I was just thinking about how you use the word here, where you said it's trauma that one is not prepared for if you're being raised by people who are not your parents, and then at some point of time you're being moved to the parents' household, or are now going to be sharing the space with the parents. Definitely, that's one way to go about it. That if you're raised by your grandparents and then you're for some reason having to shift. And why I said I like that you use the word trauma that you're not prepared for is because that to me indicates something that has happened for a reason, and I feel that can happen in a lot of other settings as well. For example, a lot of, and like, I'm just bringing in this example because we are all trying to work on both sides of this example, which is that we want to say that people should have the choice of determining when they want to have have a child. And from that argument, we mean that if somebody is, let's say, not in the societal accepted age of being a parent, that shouldn't stop them from being a parent, whether they use ART, whether they adopt, right? So the same kind of age gap would then also exist between that parent and their child. So in this case, the child will be raised by the parent, but the same kind of age gap exists. So the same kind of abandonment can occur. The same kind of health issues can occur, which may make the parent then not fit enough to, maybe meet certain needs of the child. It can also exist in a place where the child was being raised by parents, but for some reason they lose a parent, or for some reason one parent or both parents are not being able to raise that child. So like this entire, of course, like taking the mental health aspect of it, just to acknowledge that those issues, those abandonment issues or traumatic experiences can exist even when the parents are being parents to the child.
Right.
And just coming from that space, and I think we're just anyway operating on two different sides, where I'm saying that to me it's like a choice whether you want to give birth or not. And I think motherhood largely as also as a tool of socialization will be practiced by whoever raises the child or whoever chooses to raise the child. And even taking surrogacy for an example then, where of course the birth giver will not, it's like it's a contract agreement where the birth giver is not going to be raising the child. And just sort of coming from that space, to just understand then like what are like the best ways to go about it, because you want to minimize risk, like we keep talking about that. You want to minimize risk. You don't want to intentionally inflict trauma on a particular person, but it just so happens that sometimes things may not be in your control. Sometimes they may be, but you may choose the other option. So what are your thoughts on that? Just from a completely mental health perspective, and who practices motherhood.
Are you asking me? I mean, I got a little confused and distracted by Apurupa's comments in between.
No, sorry.
I was in complete awe as to how is she. No.
Sorry.
I mean, I was in awe actually. How are you multitasking so effortlessly, and I can't figure out when you are typing or
This is
not.
the question asked.
Yeah.
Types.
Yeah, I can never do it. Like I see people doing these things on lives, and I'm like, oh, do I talk? Do I listen? Do I read? Do I type?
And I keep like, when I'm trying to type, my hands just go so awkward. I am like, okay, no, never mind. I will just type it later. But so, sorry, Artika, can you please repeat your question? Like in short, I know your question was very elaborate, and I'm really, really sorry I missed on that.
No, my question was that, of course, we're talking about, trauma that can exist for a child who's not being raised by parents, because they might have to shift homes, they might have to shift between caregivers. But that same kind of dynamic can exist even if a parent is a child giver for multiple other reasons. So, of course, you want to, as people, we want to minimize the risk and we want to minimize the harm that anybody goes through. So in that scenario, is there like a way to do it? Is there a way to practice motherhood? Where you can
yes, definitely. I mean, I feel we are at a point in our lives where we realize that the quantity of time you spend with the child is not as important as the quality. And it's the type of conversations you have with them from early on. I mean, not just baby talk, but I guess even telling them about your day, and being in connection with what they have gone through, and just not letting the guilt of missing out on a few milestones that you are actually missing out because you were at work or you were doing something that was necessary for you to do. I feel that plays a huge part in today's modern motherhood, I would say, which is still a concept that is evolving. But I feel that the quality of the relationship you share with your child, and the exposure you provide to them, the conversations you have with them. So it's it's so important for you to bound, like create this bond with them, which is not just on a parental level, but also at a very humane level, that you're considering them a part, not just as a child, but you're considering them a human with feelings, and just asking them as to how they felt. Even a 3-year-old, 4-year-old child, allowing them to describe their feelings and allowing them to open up to you honestly, I feel develops a bond that no matter how many hours you spend with the child being at home, would not be able to develop. So I feel the quality of the time you spend together and the conversations you have right from the beginning are very, very important.
Thanks so much for that. Yeah, Rupa, you were saying.
No, I was like going to agree with what Madhura said, which is that yes, I understand that, hey, like I may not have the kind of time that is required for that kind of maybe always present kind of motherhood or parenthood. I may not be able to make that choice of like putting my career aside at this point. And it is a cost that you pay, right? It's like I refuse to accept this argument that nothing changes after parenthood, because obviously it's also like the demise of a relationship that you had with, let's say, your partner, the nature, like of course that's also an opportunity to rebuild something. It's also an opportunity for it to grow into something else. But it's also the demise of the way things are. Also your identity as your own personhood, which now becomes intertwined with your parenthood, inevitably. I think like there are all these very real costs that one pays, and to be cognizant of that, and to also like find ways to parent, right? It doesn't, like Madhura very rightly said, it doesn't mean that you have to be around your child 24/7. That's actually not really useful for your child's development as well. But are you able to provide the kind of care that is required for your child to flourish in your parenthood, under your parenthood? And I think like Artika, you like kept insisting on calling it the practice of parenthood, and I love that. I think it's not, you don't just become a parent, you practice parenthood. And we say this about most things, right? We say this about allyship, we say this about friendship. Like you don't just become a friend, you practice friendship. So I think, yeah, that was very beautifully, I think, answered by you, Madhura. I'd love to hear, maybe these could be our parting thoughts about, let's say someone were to consider or not consider motherhood. What are some things that they should broadly keep in mind? Like what is our take individually, our take professionally? Let's start with Arthika.
Well, I think I would just no, clear. It was clear. I guess for me, I think I would give whatever my thoughts are as a professional. And those are the thoughts that I personally practice as well. So that would, I guess, make my personal perspective also clear. My thing would be that first of all, don't do it because of XYZ reason. Do it for yourself because what? I'm sorry, what?
I was just calling you a cheater for like answering 2 questions, and I was like, I won't give you marks for both questions then.
Okay, I'll give you a longer one answer. But yeah, no, I was saying, first of all, like the thing would be that don't do it because of XYZ reasons. I think the really strong reason, I believe, and I'll tell you why, should be because you want to do it. And that's because it's not an easy task, whether you're going for a biological birth, whether you're going for an assisted birth through technology, whether you're looking for an adoption. You are going to be investing time and energy, and I'm not going to make comparisons of how much time and energy goes into what. That's a whole different thing, but everyone's experiences are valid, right? Like everybody's time and energy invested in a particular process is valid. So for me, I feel like I want to be putting in that time when it's coming from a place of want for me. Having said that, I 100% still want to acknowledge that for a lot of people, it's not an option. They don't get to practice what they want to do. And it may be an absolutely pressured situation for them, and it may just not be an option. They may not know that they have other options. But if you are someone who comes from a place of slight privilege, where you can have these kinds of negotiations with other stakeholders within your family or outside your family, I think that's like an important place to start from. And the second thing would be that this is also to say that your reason for wanting a child could very well be that my partner wants one. That's not disputed. That's still your reason. And like, we're not going to question it and be like, oh, okay, so you're doing it for your partner. Yes, you might be wanting to do something for your partner. And of course, this is a really big something. It's much bigger than maybe making like dinner or buying a gift. But at the same time, I don't know if another person can sit back and question your choice when it's coming from that sort of a place. And I think the last thing, just drawing from what Zoya said actually, is and a little bit of what I was talking about, goals for me would be that just like have a certain sense of what your goals are. So is your goal that you want a child at any cost? In that case, yes, then you make your list. You can make your list and in the sequence of your preference. So it could be, okay, definitely have a biological child, but if that doesn't work, then I still want a child. So maybe then I'm going to try XYZ, and okay, if that doesn't work, then my third option would be this. Another person's list could look like, okay, I want a biological child, but if that doesn't work, then that's it for me. I don't want to try anything else. So each person's preference would differ in that way, and I think like it's important to know where you're coming from, because it's not even like, oh, it's worth the work till you have that child, where irrespective of the process you have the child by, but it's also about after the birth, like Madhura was saying, it's also about what kind of commitment you're putting into raising the child after the birth. So yeah, I think this is my both personal and professional, I think, take on this.
Did your child make an appearance?
I just want to see the child. Please, make the child be seen.
My child was biting my toe, so I had to pick him up.
Oh, that's Hi, cutie.
Mine decided to come and we sat there, and he has the worst cold and cough. So if someone sounds like they're like an old person coughing.
Oh, that's so good.
Okay, Madhura, you go next.
I completely agree with what you said, Artika, but adding to that, yes, no judgment to someone who decides to have become a parent, based on their partner's choice. But then you also need to understand when they do that, they sort of lose the liberty to become or hold any resentment towards that partner later on in life. So I do yes, I want to add to that, but also I would like to just say that let's normalize having conversations about motherhood as a choice in general. I mean, it doesn't have to be taken for granted that motherhood is something that each of us is going to end up adapting into, or just adapting the choice in general in our lives. And I feel if the more we normalize and the more we have such conversations within our family, our peers, our colleagues, I feel it'll just improve the perspective of people towards this topic. So I feel that is very, very important, at least to just initiate the conversation.
Yeah, I love that. Who do you want next?
Madhura, I also want you to just quickly touch upon being a pet parent and how that requires the same type of cognizance a little bit, because I know that this is something that is very important for you.
Yes, I mean, I genuinely do not find much of a difference, because the amount of care that goes into taking care of a pet is pretty much similar. I have had pets growing up, and the relationship I shared with them was so typically of a sibling. But ever since I have, brought a pet home myself individually, my feeling towards them has changed as well. And I lost a pet recently, and the grief I had was of losing a child. And I do believe that the love the pets can give to you and you can give in return has no bounds. um, no comparison to a child, definitely, but again, just because it is an animal and cannot verbalize or vocalize their emotions, does not negate or invalidate my motherhood towards it. So I feel it is extremely viable and important, and you need to put in equal efforts to take care of the pet as well. I mean, now there are trainers who don't just teach pet to sit and get up, but they actually do psychological training as well, as to boost their self-confidence and their self-esteem, which was so fascinating to me, which is not something that I had known, having pets during my childhood. So it's so important to just generally widen your horizons about pet parenting as well.
Sorry, we're all super distracted by the cutie. Like, I don't think we've focused ever
Should I
since.
put him down because he keeps biting me
No,
anyway?
please.
No, I want to say, I didn't mean, like, the idea was not to put him away at all. Like, it was just like, give us a moment to also observe.
My fiance is just whistling from inside now because he heard that he's biting.
Sorry, we vote to have him here. My first vote would be we want the child in the conversation. What is the child's name, if I may ask?
He is called Oreo.
Oh,
That's cute.
So cute.
it's like black on the top, black on the bottom. Middle.
But I think
Glad no one heard it. Zoya, I'd love to hear what you add to this checklist. No, now you heard it. What is happening?
We all heard it. It was just staggered.
yeah. I think the two of y'all have. I'm going to just start because I know the poor thing's struggling. But I think the two of y'all have brought upon really important points, and I'd say motherhood is a shade. It's what fits you best at whatever stage in your life. Figure that out. Figure it for yourself, and don't feel guilty about it. And Madhura said that we feel guilty about motherhood, and by forcing motherhood into certain brackets when you don't see yourself into that, that's not a nice place to be, even for someone who's given birth, So I think we're all changing. Life's changing. Hopefully we're a better, we're a more evolved, more flexible and open-minded generation. So hopefully things change, but do what feels best for you.
Yeah, I love that.
That was beautiful. I'd also love to hear you add a couple of insights on the whole fertility aspect of things, just as a sum up for our audience.
Okay, like I said, you want to have a choice. You don't want to have a decision being thrown at you, because unfortunately no one tells us these things, and I'm going to tell you a personal experience. But before I started learning about fertility treatment, I had people tell me that, oh my God, you're going to spend all these years studying in your life, and when you're going to have kids, you're not going to have the time. And I was like, yeah, so what? I'm going to undergo fertility treatment. How does it matter? When I actually went back in and started learning this and started seeing it, I'm like, it's not an easy journey. It's not just physically intensive, it's emotionally intensive. So you need to think about what you're doing. Make an make an informed choice. Understand the pros, the cons of, say, having a child today, not having a child at all, having a child at a later stage, and then make that decision and go to a doctor. It's not just because you go to see someone, it doesn't mean there's a problem. It's always good to be proactive, just to be like, okay, this is where I'm at. This is what it is. These are my options. I may choose to take them or I may not choose to take them, and that's on you. But at least you've explored these options, you know, at the back of your mind. That's what haunts me every day, that people come there, and that's what also drives me to do what I do. You know, people come here at an age where they can't do anything, and we feel so helpless because we're like, I wish someone told you this when you were younger. I wish someone told you this. So I think that's where I'd end at. Make an informed choice about anything in life.
Yeah. And also, like, I'll just add to that, Zoya, what you said earlier. Maybe I'm frozen again, but I'll say it anyway, which is, you know, first, like, be around kids, see if you like them, see if that's something that you enjoy, like having a child around you and like with children and conversing with them and treating them like human beings, like Madhura also pointed out, like asking them about their feelings. I feel like it's a great idea to even sit with yourself and say, hey, what kind of parent would I potentially be? What do I think my potential roadblocks would be? Are there any books on this topic? Are there workshops that I can attend where I can talk about these things? Are there support groups? What about, what if I face loss? What if I have a mistake? How am I going to cope with that? Or what if I can't have a child? Because of whatever reasons, how am I going to cope with that? I feel like all these conversations can and should be had in social settings like this, with your friends, right? And with yourself and with your partner, like Madhura pointed out as well. So I'd say even, to sit with yourself and like all about, I feel like most of, Artika's and my solutions are make that list, right? But like really, I think it could be useful when you're making a decision like this. I think that I learned so much this conversation. I know, like, I have like 2-3 things that I really want to think about almost immediately and start having conversations with like mental health, physical health, and reproductive health professionals. So thank you so much for this incredibly, enlightening conversation, all of you. Artika, do you have any, final parting words for all of us?
No, that's about it. And for like, again, thank you so much to Madhura for bringing the topic and actually having the 3 of us on board. And
It was all
we
just showed up.
I'm just so glad that we actually, had an open conversation, and we were so immersed into it that we did not realize we had been speaking for so long. So I really enjoyed this conversation, truly.
Yeah, and I hope for
This
all
is
of
why
us.
they laugh. You remember when we said 45 minutes? This is why they laugh.
Oh, I know. I'm like, that's not
Now
happening.
Now I know.
Yeah, and I think like
No, and I was
sorry, Artika, go ahead.
no, please speak. Your video is good right now.
Tap it out. I was gonna like, bas bag ho gaya abhi aur kitna. I was gonna quote like
No, I
it's
will talk to you more. No, I was saying I hope this can be a starting of mine, because even right now, we discussed so much, and yes, we would talk so long. Us on and forward as well as for the listeners. And now to say bye to us.
I love
Right. Hello, and then she has to go.
can we please set Oreo?
We could just ask.
I don't want to know where wrong.
We didn't even think of that possibility.
No, right now. Oh, nice.
This is her mom friendness coming out. She's like, go to sleep.
Go to sleep now. Bye.
Am I back?
Oh, you're moving. Yes, you're back.
Can you hear me? Potentially, hopefully, who knows? Maybe you can hear me. You can hear me. Great. Thank you to our very patient audience who stayed with us for like an hour and 45 minutes. And like to quote, it's a unit. Motherhood is like my audio. It comes and it goes. And that's okay. And that's
I want to
valid.
make a t-shirt. I really want to make a t-shirt of
Right.
this.
I think that's a great idea. Let's do it. Let's link up after this live. But yeah, thank you so much, everybody, and thank you to our special guests, and thank you to once again thank you to Madhura for coming up with this wonderful topic, and
Thank
for
you so much for having me. Thank you.
yeah, bye.
Bye.
Bye.